Chapter 13, A Single Step. A single step. It was their first day on the road, on a journey that would take them across almost the entire length of Tethur, the desert village of Amkithran, nestled on the westernmost edge of the Marching Mountains, between the arid foothills and the scorching barren dunes of the Kalim Desert. But they were not there yet. Imoen smiled, face tilted to the deep blue sky, the plains about them rippling under the warm breeze, and her body felt light as it pulled at her tunic, at last free of the cloak and pack that had burdened every day of walking since they had left Suldaneseller. This was how journeys should be made, the girl listening to the jovial shouts of the merchants and rumble of carts about her as they traveled the main road west, their small group joining the long caravan of wagons and travelers who had been prompt to leave Saradush that morning, as well. She sent a nod to the tall warrior she now knew as Athik, who was walking abreast of her a few paces to their left, the young mage she recognized from the walls of Saradush, Aruna, sending her a smile through the jostle. She and Fritha were not the only ballspawn in that company. In fact, many of the children had joined and even been welcomed onto the caravan just as they had been, the extra guards a necessary deterrent against the few brigands who had managed to escape the slaughter at Saradush. Imoen pulled her gaze to the girl walking at her side, Fritha there in customary scarf and robe despite the fine weather, both as blue as the sky above them, Solafane on her other side. His appearance had garnered more than a few looks on their arrival at the caravan this morning, though nothing had been said, and the drow himself seemed relaxed enough in their company, though she noticed his eyes were forever scanning the plains, constantly on watch for some potential danger. Imoen was not so concerned, merely glad to take pleasure in the day as they marched ever onward.
A whole fortnight of walking,
she sighed, the breeze flicking playfully at her short hair.
I hope every day's like this. Jahara said to expect rain in the next couple,
said Fritha. Imoen refused to be swayed from her good humor.
Hasn't happened yet. Gods, Fritha, aren't you warm with your robe on? Yes, but I can't be bothered to carry it. I will take it for you,
came Solafane promptly, eliciting Fritha's smile as she demurred.
No, it's fine. You should ask Mistress Harjeev or one of the other wagon drivers if you can put your stuff in their cart,
offered Imoen more practically. Gods, how she rued the day she had become the sensible one.
That's what I did.
Imoen flung her arms wide to illustrate this glorious freedom, but Fritha just frowned.
Perhaps my robe. I don't feel comfortable without my bag. Why? As long as you've your weapon, what is it?
Imoen snapped as she noticed her friend's gaze catch on the distant hills.
There are birds circling on the horizon.
Imoen whipped back, her eyes straining as she just made out the specks that wheeled and looped, and she exhaled the breath she didn't realize she had held.
Gods, you're a bit edgy, it's probably just some farmer plowing ready for his winter barley.
She glanced to the man along from her, his eyes narrowed with a wince beneath his hat's brim as he watched them too.
Does the light still bother you, Solafane? No, not particularly, the fires of the evening and the glare of noon still cause me some discomfort, but it is nothing I cannot bear.
Fritha was smiling.
Another month or so and I warrant you will see the best of us all. What is it Imoen says? It has not happened yet.
And the drow smiled as she and Fritha warmed the air with a laugh.
Good Solafane.
Their three turned back at the call, Minsk walking a few paces behind with Jahara and Valigar, the Rashami beckoning to them, and Solafane made his excuses, dropping back at the request. Imoen instantly slipped a conspiratorial arm about her friend's elbow.
So, you and Solafane then? Me and Solafane, what? Fritha,
Imoen laughed, hardly able to believe she was trying to play the innocent in this.
"I've barely been able to get between you all day, word or otherwise."
But Fritha merely shrugged.
"I suppose we're just used to each other's company now. But what about you and our reticent ranger?"
She continued with a glance back to where he was walking with Minsk, Jahara, and Solafane, the man a silent observer to their friendly talk.
"You don't seem as enchanted with his company as you once did." "Yeah, well, we sort of talked about it, but it didn't work out."
Imoen smiled, neatly glossing over just what had been said. She was trying to be mature and gracious about the whole thing, though parts of her hadn't quite caught up to that concept yet. Her mind still had a tendency to chant git every time his name was mentioned. Fritha pressed her elbow to her hip, Imoen's arm caught in a gentle squeeze.
"I'm sorry, perhaps that's for the best, though. This life isn't particularly conducive to relationships." "It's fine, after what's happened lately, it doesn't seem that important anymore." Listen to us,"
Imoen cried, laughing at her own melancholy.
"I'm supposed to be cheering you up." "I don't need cheering, do I? You tell me. You seem a bit, I don't know, quiet." "I don't think I am, perhaps you are just noticing it more now you are quiet too. Jahara told me, about the boy you met in Saradush."
Imoen heaved a sigh, the megrims refusing to be banished.
"Yeah, the lovely Agwin. He was really nice, not much older than me, and now he's gone." "Yes. Jahara also told me that when the time came, it was you who took up the standard."
Imoen laughed again, it was starting to sound strained.
"Yeah, I did, didn't I? Funny thing is, I look back now and it hardly feels like me." "You did well,"
Fritha pressed. Imoen bobbed a shrug.
"Nothing you wouldn't have done, were you there?" "Yes, but I wasn't." "No, you were off doing the other half of the plan. It was neat, wasn't it, how we were all working together without even realizing it?"
Fritha's face was blank.
"Yes."
A flicker of irritation.
"Fritha, what's wrong with you?" "Nothing."
"Look," Imoen snapped, tired of feeling as though she was trying to pull them both from that mire,
"You're the one who left and came down here, we were worried sick about you. None of this would have happened if you had just gone to Athkatla like I wanted. Then Saradush would be in ruins and its people would be dead." "You don't know that,"
muttered Imoen sullenly. Fritha sighed.
"No, but would either of us take that risk? Toril turns on people like you and I, people who do the right thing, its axis greased with our blood." "Oh, you're so morbid, I'm blaming Solafane,"
she announced as the drow himself arrived back, Imoen continuing with a determined cheer.
"Now, Solafane, what did you do, mate? I left her all happy, and now she's moping about with a face on her like an acolyte of Shar."
Contrary to this description, Fritha was giggling, the man blinking owlishly as he glanced between them.
"I did nothing. We spent our days in idle talk, the self-destructive nature of society, fate and predestination, the pointlessness of existence."
The girls laughed, Fritha continuing,
"It is a pity Herr Dallas left, you sound to have made a fine doom guard." "I wonder what they are both doing now?"
asked Imoen of the sky. Fritha snorted.
"Herr Dallas will be reveling in the glory of the plains, and Ari will be making sure they reach the next inn and remember to stock up on supplies and don't end up chasing through the abyss."
It was 3 hours later when the caravan finally ground to a halt with the dusk, their group finding a space towards the western edge of the encampment as the wagons huddled together for the night, the guards starting their patrols on the perimeters. He, Minsk and Jahara were all due a shift from their group, but not until later that night, Valigar letting the chatter of the others drift over him as he quickly pitched his tent and settled before it to fletch the 20 arrows he had bought in Saradush, the ones he had brought from Suldanisseller and many more now peppering the plains before that smoking city. These arrows were hardly the quality he was used to, but all the better supplies had been used by the city's archers during the siege. There was little he could do for the most part, though the vanes could be changed for better, Valigar spending the 2 nights at the Order's camp cutting some new fletchings, and now it was just a case of swapping old for new. His hunting knife cleanly stripped off the old flights, the linen thread taut over his fingers as he wound it carefully between the barbs and about the shaft, his eyes often distracted from their task by the camp about him. Minsk and Solifane were pitching the last of the tents between them, the 3 women left to the cooking, Jahara stirring the pot of simmering water to add some muslin-wrapped bundle of herbs, Imoen fascinated as she watched Fritha roughly chop a carrot with only her hand. Valigar turned away from this blatant sorcery with an inward sigh. Ever since his argument with Imoen, it had felt like it had in the beginning, he an outsider in a group who had long ago formed their bonds, though such he knew was little excuse, even the drow seemed more a part of things than he. Such would never have bothered him before, he was well used to standing alone in things, he wondered now why it did. So much for his words to Minsk, perhaps he should have returned north with the order, gone back to that estate and started anew his old promise to return that house to its former glory. But then the others had spoken of Amcathran and he had known he would go with them, and not only for Tether or the people it could save, but because he just did not want to leave that company. The last vein secured, and he rose, fetching up his bow to slip from their clearing. He wanted to test these new fletchings before a fight gave a sense of exigency to the thing, a few paces from the camp bringing him to that darkening plain, the amber sky already fading to indigo in the east. He had no target on the rolling grassland, no tree or bush to aim for, but at least he could see how they flew and grouped, the movement of the bow a familiar anchor in that eddying world.
"Hey Vals,"
came her voice. The arrow missed the others by a good few yards.
"Oops, sorry, did I put you off?"
Imoen laughed as he whirled to find her behind him, her feet seemingly noiseless on the ever-whispering grass.
"Jahara wants to know if you are going to eat with us or whether you had sated your appetite with brooding," her words, not mine.
She added at his frown.
"I will join you all shortly." "Well, I'll let her know."
She paused, bottom lip nipped by concerned teeth as she continued.
"Are you all right though? You've been quiet all day, even for you." "I am fine."
The girl sighed, turning to go.
"Ah, suit yourself, mate."
Her name halted her.
"Imoen."
Valigar swallowed dryly, finally forcing the words past his discomfort.
"I am sorry for before, if I hurt you." "What?"
She frowned, though seemingly more from amusement than anything else. Before that, too, was dismissed with a shake of her head, the girl smiling once more.
"Oh, well, don't worry. And I'm sorry too, you know, if anything I did upset you. It wasn't your fault, sometimes these things just happen." "We can remain as friends then."
Imoen laughed.
"Course. Now are you coming, or what?" "I shall collect my arrows and join you." "Good, I'll see you there, then."
There had been a time she would have waited for him, but no longer, and he watched her skip back to the camp, pink hair bright against that molten sky. Neither the crackling fire before him nor the glowing sky above, sweeping brush strokes of gold in the sunset, the drifting clouds daubs of pink and orange painted there by some careless hand, could lift the darkness over his small corner of the camp. A no-man sat at the mouth of his tent, hunger ignored in his stomach, the man still holding the prayer book he had meant to read and found he could not bear to open, a sliver of that bleached parchment square just visible between the thin pages. He should get rid of it. There seemed little point in keeping a picture when he had held the true article in his arms and then just as easily let her go. Simon had asked him nothing of it, as they had fallen into rank beside each other and the order had finally set out that morning, and no man suspected he and Eric had agreed between them to leave him to his decision and let him stand by it. And he was. He had chosen the order and his duty, and now he was miserable, just as he had known he would be.
A no-man.
He started, glancing up to find Brianna still seated opposite and sewing in the firelight, the woman resolved to keep him company even when Simon and Eric had grown tired enough to leave him to his brooding.
You did not hear a word, did you? Forgive me, my lady, I...
She forestalled his excuses with a serene smile, her face golden in the fire's glow.
No matter. You have been very quiet all day. You miss them, do you not? Your friends, and the young lady, I can see in your eyes the regret.
She sent him a measured look across the licking flames.
I could see it in hers, too.
A no-man snorted, pushing the prayer book back into his bag just for something to do.
The only thing in Frith's eyes are the ghosts of too many dead, but I thank you for trying to pretend otherwise.
Brianna breathed a gentle sigh.
It is clear to me you would be with her, so I did not go with them. As Sir Elquist was eager to remind me, I have a duty to the order.
A no-man, she cried, almost pleading,
you have a duty to yourself, as well. I have met the prelate and I do not believe he is the sort of man who would punish another for doing what they believe to be right. And that is what I am doing, not just for myself and the order, but for her, too. Fritha left Sultanasselar to try and spare us from this. The others refuse to see it, but I know it makes it harder for her having them along, knowing her heritage might bring their end.
Brianna was shaking her head.
They do see it, a no-man, but they also know that they must go with her, because she cannot do this alone, and Fritha recognizes that, too. And before I would have been the same.
He cried.
Before, when I stood by while she broke countless laws, when I aided her in acts that risked the disfavor of the order and my church both, and she hated it. The guilt she would feel if I was expelled for following her now.
Brianna was staring back at him, an unreadable cast to her eyes as she no doubt considered these crimes, when to his surprise a sudden smile quirked her lips, the lady almost laughing in her bewilderment.
I do not understand, a no-man, you were willing to risk everything for her before, and yet now you will not chance it, even when there is far more than mere affection to compel you to her cause. She will not want me there,
he pressed stubbornly. Brianna would hear none of it.
A no-man, Fritha sees her duty in this far more clearly than you, I fear. Yes, she may not like it, but you are at least a strong ally, and that will be what she needs most in the coming days. Come on!
She barked, suddenly on her feet and gesturing for him to do the same.
Get up, we can make the nearest village by nightfall. My lady, what are you doing? What should be done, for the good of Tether and yourself both? As Sir Morgad once told me, there comes a time in your life when you must put aside all reasoning and follow your heart, as I now plan to follow mine. Come, we are heading south.
Imoen returned to camp with a cheerful bounce to her gate, Valigar rejoining them soon afterwards as she had promised he would, and their group settled down to dinner together within their small encampment of tents, all full of the talk and laughter Fritha was not used to after so long, and it was only a short while before she rose from her place, muttering something about walking out before she retired. Solafane had already been on his feet with an offer to join her, something that had got more than a couple of raised eyebrows, 2 from Imoen, though Fritha did not care, and a quarter-hour's stroll out into the surrounding plains found them where they were now, laying side by side in the grass, the twilight drawing in to open a whole heaven of stars above, the fires of the caravan just points of light on the horizon. Fritha gazed up at the sky, so clear and vast it could be all there was, the girl feeling small and wonderfully insignificant for one usually so burdened with importance. Next to her Solafane breathed a wistful sigh.
I love the night.
Fritha smiled, sitting to take in the plains about them, an ocean of rippling silver under the moon as the warm breeze soughed through the long grasses, and her mind was drawn unexpectedly back to a Nomen, wondering if he was sat somewhere similar enjoying the same, though she pushed the thought away, it would do no one any good thinking about it. They had both made their decisions in this, and both were the best that could be reached for the people they were and the lives they had chosen to lead. Next to her Solafane shifted upright as well, arms gathered loosely about his knees.
I wonder if the elves will be taking pleasure in it, too,
he pondered to the inky sky.
They may well be using the night to cover their passage back to the Wildeth. Quite so.
Fritha glanced to him.
Do you think Fernil is missing us?
Solafane barked a loud laugh.
Yes, I think he is sat within his tent weeping that he has no one to abuse now.
Fritha giggled.
Oh, poor Fernil, I wish you had not said that, I feel sorry for him in spite of myself.
The drow snorted.
Save your pity for one who truly deserves it. Such as Valigar? He's been in a worse mood than me today.
She laughed. Solafane was still smiling, though his eyes were grave.
Such as yourself. Ah, I have nothing to feel sorry about, not really. I am alive now and I can sit here and watch the stars with my good friend. There have been many lately who will never again have the chance for the same.
Solafane nodded grimly.
I imagine that will become an unfortunately more common occurrence in the coming days for those caught in the maelstrom of this war between your kin. What do you see for us, walking in the eye of this tempest as we are? Well,
Fritha sighed, taking a moment to consider it.
I imagine we will arrive at Amkithran. Find Sendai. Fight. Find last 2 members of this 5. Fight. Then Ball will come back anyway, because we overlooked the fact that Fernil was actually the most powerful ballspawn of us all. We fight, we die, or live, or ascend, or get trapped with him in some hell dimension for all eternity, sparing Faerun his coming but ultimately sacrificing ourselves in the process.
She laughed weakly.
There are as many possibilities as there are stars, Solafane. Ah, I should not be so bleak. The nature of existence tells me that anything could happen. I don't know, a great army of wizards could come from Kalimshan to fight the 5 for us, or all the ballspawn could just call a truce and try to carry on with their lives, or Ao himself could twist the heavens and just remove the essence from us all. It's just experience tells me that he likely won't. The possibility is still there.
Solafane reminded quietly.
Yes. Tell you what.
She announced, giving his knee a cheerful slap.
If we survive all this, afterwards I'll take you to see Candlekeep and Ashabenford and all the other places I've wanted to see or wanted to see again. I look forward to it.
Fritha laughed.
Good then. As long as you don't count on it.
Solafane said nothing, just watched her a moment longer, his face unreadable when suddenly he was rooting through his bag.
Here, I have a present for you. A present?
And he placed in her hand a fold of parchment and small jar of dark russet powder.
I bought it from one of the merchants, it is henna,
he answered at her look.
He told me the ladies of the south use it to stain designs onto their bodies.
She gazed down at it, feeling a sudden vain thrill as her mind fluttered back to the archives and those books of Kalimshite prints filled with exotic women, lissom bodies decorated in silks and paints.
Can you use it?
He smiled.
I am no artist, but my hand is steady and I have an eye for pattern.
Frithha grinned, and suddenly she was hauling off her tunic, her back to him as she slipped the straps of her camisole from her shoulders and let the thin cotton drop down to bunch about her waist, a hand clasped over each breast as Solafane busied himself behind her, using water from his flask to mix the henna into a thick paste, the parchment rolled into a cone, ready to pipe the mixture he had made. He started on her back, working over her shoulders and the tops of her arms, and it did not feel awkward even when he knelt before her, the man approaching his work with a detached artistry as he traced his design right down to the hand-cupped swell of her breasts.
There,
he sighed, finally sitting back on his haunches with an unmistakable air of satisfaction,
and we are finished.
Frithha was still grinning.
I daren't move to look until it's dry. What did you draw? I confess I took inspiration from the temple frieze at the elven ruins outside Sultanasselar. I'm covered in scenes of elves fighting drow.
He chuckled fondly.
Not quite. Here.
She felt him lightly touch the small of her back.
There is a rising sun, the rays bursting out to curl into the chrysanthemum flowers you left in Sultanasselar. From there, sweep up the branches of the tree of life, a prayer song to Rilafane entwined about the leaves, while along your spine the phases of my illustrious moon, for she has blessed me in you. Over your shoulders the leafy branches stretch, to be crowned by clouds and stars that rest upon the heavens of your breast.
Frithha laughed.
Such imagery, I feel like an altar.
The drow just shrugged.
There is much in you to worship. They say we will reach the next town in a few days, you may see it properly in the mirror then. Ah, I can't wait. How long before it's dry? Another hour. Are you cold?
No, she sighed, carefully leaning forward to pillow her arms upon her bent knees, her chest hidden behind them.
I am fine.
Solafane smiled, reclining back in the grass once more, his eyes closed, and Frithha did not overlook the gesture.
You can continue you stargazing, Solafane, I'm not embarrassed. Do not worry, I can see them still.
The second day had dawned cloudy. Jaharis predicted rains not long away it seemed, though Frithha imagined they would be quite welcome when they did come, the air close and muggy with a heat that only increased as the sun peaked, suffusing the heavy clouds above with an intense glary light that fell in shafts across the grasslands, a bridge of gold for some celestial herald. They were still on the plains, though the road had dipped south to skirt the northern edge of the Mere Forest. Frithha tried to focus more on the dappled greens of the swaying trees next to her, rather than the murky swamp she knew was at its heart, the dark waters of the mangroves deep with secrets. According to her map, there was a small river running almost parallel to the road a few hundred yards within, one of the tributaries to the Ith they would soon be crossing, many a hand from the caravan leaving their wagons, skins and pots with them as they nipped into the forest to stock up on their supplies of water while they could, the caravan rumbling slowly onward. Frithha tried not to let the dawdling pace bother her. She had awoken that morning with a very determined cheer in her heart. Yesterday had been hard, setting out from Saradush, leaving both Anomen and hopes for some sort of snatched future behind her. But, as she kept reminding herself, she had chosen this path and it was not fair on Imoen to continue like this, insisting nothing was wrong, but still trudging along next to the girl like she was being walked to the gallows. Besides, she had pulled herself from such misery enough times before, was this instance any different? Frithha did not consider it was, though the thought was hardly a comfort and she let her attention drift back to those walking with her. For the last hour, she and Imoen had been joined by Ithik and his company, the petite blonde Erina on one side of that tall warrior, the old dwarf, Golland, on his other, while the half-elves, Vigo and Hantha, marched just behind. Fritha watched the tall man as he laughed at some joke of Imoen's. He seemed older than their usual kin, probably almost at his 30th winter, his black hair falling in a disheveled mop about his square, smiling face. His nose was strong and looked to have been broken at least once, his jaw as grey as the iron breastplate he wore, and Fritha considered with his pale colouring he likely always looked as though he needed a shave, though with a couple of days on the road behind them, perhaps at the moment he just did. The girl next to him was closer to their age though, her pale blonde hair tidied away into the dark brown hood of her travelling robes, the girl seemingly unaffected by the day's heat, though her skin held an olive cast that indicated she may have been born in similar climes.
So, it is you and Fritha who are the children in your group?
Came Erina, Imoen nodding blithely.
Yeah, just us two, though to be fair, I didn't even know I was one until a few months ago. Really?
The girl cried.
I can't even imagine it. I've known all my life, well almost, my mother told me when she thought I was old enough to understand. She fell pregnant without lying with a man, and when she spoke with the local temple, the priests there made an examination and explained to her what had happened. They suggested she cleanse the pregnancy, but my mother would not. She said who my father had been would make no difference as long as I was brought up properly. And how right she was,
laughed Golland, the girl blushing prettily behind a hand.
So was it the same for you then, Ithik?
Continued Imoen.
No, I grew up in an orphanage in Neverwinter, but my blood made itself known when I hit my teens.
He chuckled good-naturedly.
I was a bit of a tearaway. Gods, I doubt anyone would have noticed any difference for us two,
exclaimed Imoen.
Or you, at least,
added Fritha. Her friend laughed.
Yeah. So it's just you and Erina in your group then? That is so,
the young mage nodded,
though Ithik seems to draw more trouble than me. I do at that.
He laughed loudly.
Do you remember that brawl in the inn back in Daggerford? Yes, we still aren't welcome there,
agreed Hantha with a stern toss of her dark brown hair.
They've got a poster of you in the watch barracks. So, what about you girls?
Asked Golland, his grey beard twitching with a smile.
Does the blood attract the same trouble as it does for these two?
Imoen glanced to her with a grin and Fritha could see it behind her eyes. She was wondering how much to tell them.
Kind of. I was arrested by the cowled wizards a few months back, but that was mostly because I used magic in Ithkatla. Can you think of anything else, Fritha? Well, there was a bounty on us for a couple of thousand gold last midsummer, though that's since been withdrawn. Oh,
she added in sudden afterthought.
And I had the Harpers after me for a time last autumn.
Imoen was not alone in her astounded look.
The Harpers? You never said. And what did you do to stir up those meddlers?
Asked Vigo, dark eyes keen beneath the frown. Fritha shrugged.
Nothing really, they just got me to do this test and that was it, wanted to box me up there and then to keep me out of trouble. I just couldn't understand it. Now, Fritha,
she began, in a voice of serene inquiry,
something easy to start with, what is your favorite color? Blood. Now, that's not exactly a color. But I like it, it suits me, drinking it, washing in it, generally splashing it about the place.
Their laughter was warming, Ithik slapping her back.
Ha! I like you, girl.
Erina's smile faded with her sigh.
I wish all the children could laugh about it like you and we. When we traveled with Melisande.
She shook her head sadly.
Such bitterness and hatred.
Hantha nodded.
Yes, well, some have had a harder time than you Ithik. And what excuse is that?
Said Ithik bluntly.
It's like Imoan said, this curse is a problem the children share, and it's up to all of us to work it out. Is that why you came to Saradush?
Asked Imoan. The warrior shrugged.
In kind. It was said Melisande knew of the prophecies, and how this whole mess is going to end. We came to see what she had to say. But it seems her solution was just to hide us all away and wait for it to blow over, and we all saw how well that worked out. We were about to quit her company when that army arrived and trapped us there.
Sighed Golland.
She had everyone cowering in that damned hall waiting for a miracle. I've never met so many lost, frightened people. That Melisande managed to get quite a following. The weak will always require an anchor,
muttered Vigo, a glance to them inducing him to add,
though there are other reasons, I am sure, to serve the woman. We don't serve her,
countered Imoan.
We were just asking her about our friend who was missing and we sort of fell in together when the city came under siege. You go to Amkithran now, do you not?
Asked Hantha. Frithha nodded.
Yes, there's a monastery there where we can find out some more information on the prophecies.
A look was shared about them, Ithik scratching his stubbly chin.
Is that so? What is it?
Pressed Imoan. Hantha answered her.
It seems Melisande has been giving many people the same meeting place, if not the same reason. She has told many on this caravan to await her in Amkithran, that insignificant village, her next best hiding place for the children, though, after last time, there are fewer who are willing to put their faith in her. Not that they dared strike out on their own,
added Vigo with a sneer.
A group of Tethiran soldiers arrived at Saradush the day after the battle, enticing many away with tales of a hidden refuge the Tethryan leadership have set up, where the children will be kept in safety until this trouble has passed.
He snorted,
just like Saradush was supposed to be. Many went with them, but what can you do?
Sighed Golland.
All must walk their own paths. Here,
shouted a voice before any could reply, one of the caravan heads walking down the line of wagons towards them.
No offense, but you guards would probably be a bit more useful spread along our lines rather than all clumped here having a nice old gossip. I hear you, mate,
Ithik called back, those about him already pairing up as they made to fan out again.
We'd best go, they're paying our wages, after all. Yeah,
said Imoan,
perhaps we'll catch you later.
The man nodded, he and Aruna quickening their pace to disappear behind the cart before them. Minsk watched as the girls ahead of him were left to walk alone once more. Jahara had fallen back in the caravan to help tend a mule that had stepped upon a sharp stone, Minsk remaining there as guard, though it was difficult to keep alert through that haze of heat, the sweat beading on his bald head, tunic clinging to his back where it ran down his spine to pool in the small, slick and distracting.
Hey Minsk,
called Imoan, the girl glancing back to find him alone and beckoning wildly,
come walk with us.
Minsk felt Bootwitch in his pocket, eager for the company, he could see no harm in it.
Hello Minsk,
greeted Frithha, a smile he was glad to see upon her face.
How is Boo liking the heat? He is not, young Frithha, and neither am I. The sun of these lands is like a fell witchcraft that steals the wool and fogs the mind. Poor Boo,
sighed Imoan, Minsk letting the hamster scurry from his hand to hers where he paused for a quick wash.
I don't think any of us are enjoying the weather today. We can sing an ode of the ice fields if you like,
offered Frithha.
All that lovely snow might help cool you down.
Minsk smiled and shook his head, Boo back with him and scuttling up his arm to perch and taste the breeze from his shoulder.
No, young Frithha, we have no strength for singing now. We could make up our own ode and sing it for you,
came Imoen eagerly.
About a mighty warrior who had to travel to foreign lands braving great heat and strange ways to battle a fierce evil.
Minsk felt the smile pulling wide his mouth. How the gods had blessed him with such bright little sisters.
Odes are not for the living, young Imoen, but serve to glory those past. Maybe we can hang on for you a bit then, eh?
The girl laughed, and they spent the rest of their time together talking of the odes they would sing to describe to his fellow Rashami the distant land of Tethur. Of the silvery plains and the boiling sky, and the moist heat that clung to the skin, and the pretty boys, Imoen had insisted as her eye had caught on the swarthy vigor of some wagon driver's son. It was another few hours before the caravan just halted there on the road, spreading out across the plain and up to the forest's boundary as they made camp. They had found a place on the edge only a few yards from the tree line. Jahara had thought the gloom of forest may hold some cool, though Minsk found it little respite, the heat hanging about him like a shroud as he sat before his tent, as far from the cooking fire as space would allow. Jahara kept assuring them it would rain soon like the mantra of the shamans, the woman stirring the pot and sending frowns to those grey clouds as though they were betraying her. It seemed Fritha had long given up on waiting for it though, and had taken her own measures, the girl disappearing into her tent and returning moments later, barefoot and wearing fresh trousers and the linen slip she slept in, that blue woven scarf still looped about her neck. It was a change that had given surprise to many, though Minsk saw no trouble to it. Men wore clothes as the beast wore their furs, to protect against cold and other teeth of nature, and when these were lessened, then less was needed. She was knelt behind the seated Solafane now, the drow fanning them both with his hat, his head forward as the girl gently worked some knot from the back of his neck, Imoen watching them with an undisguised interest. Young girls and their fixation with matters of the heart. How many evenings had he sat with his fang, men tended similarly by the fellow warriors about them, all brothers in their camaraderie.
Better.
Fritha sighed, at last, sitting back and shifting to take a seat on the robe they both were sat on. The drow smiled and nodded, and Imoen turned to find distraction from another, the girl skipping over to catch at Valigar's sleeve and divert him with talk, the man seeming to take pleasure in her attentions as he laughed and brushed something from her hair. Minsk felt the frown crease his brow, the man hauling off his own tunic to throw it onto the bag beside him. Imoen had moved to help Jahara with the cooking and he nodded to the man she had left, Valigar crossing to sink down next to him.
The heat is still troubling you, Minsk. This is so, though not as much as other matters, you and young Imoen seem together often of late.
Valigar looked for a moment taken aback, before his face fell once more into that usual mask.
Indeed. We have settled our misunderstanding and are friends once more. Yes, as long as she knows this too.
Valigar was frowning, but it mattered not, such words needed to be spoken and, as Boo would often tell him, it was through Minsk they were to be given voice.
Right, dinner's ready so pass me up your dishes,
called Imoen, blithely rattling the spoon about the pot until Jahara seized it from her, sending the girl back to her place as she served their meal herself. Valigar remained seated there at his side, making no moves to join the girl, a comfortable silence descending as everyone set to their dishes. The stew was rich tonight, the dried meat long cooked with a strong flavor of garlic, though Minsk hardly minded.
Oh, if it's not Jahara,
came a cheerful voice, Minsk turning to see the driver whose mule she had tended before, the man sending a friendly nod to the rest of them as he explained,
I thought you lot would be camped further up. Old Gemund is offloading some of his wine cheap, if you want any, oh and tell him to put a bottle on my tab for your help today, m'lady.
Jahara nodded once.
My thanks. Do you wish for some?
Asked the dark elf of the girl next to her, their dishes already cleared. Minsk frowned, neither of them ate enough to keep a frost shrew fed. Fritha was nodding.
Please. In fact I'll come, too.
She added, letting him help her to her feet.
Bring enough for us all.
The pair rose to leave the camp, Imoen letting her eyes follow them.
I didn't think much of it here, but I wouldn't have thought she'd wander about the camp in her night clothes. What does it matter? The warrior sisters of my home enter furious battle with little more than the woad on their bodies. Yeah, well, don't be mentioning that to her, I might find it a bit distracting.
Minsk's laugh was shared by many. Inomen nodded to the lad, the boy smiling as he raised a hand to pat the neck of the bay gelding next to him, the reins of both it and Brianna's grey warhorse held in his other hand as the pair left their horses on the edge of the encampment. Inomen felt a nervous chill sweep over him despite the dusk's heat, a glance stolen at the woman next to him yielding the same reassuring, if stern smile she had offered him all day as they set off in the direction the guards had pointed, making their way through the winding avenues of carts and wagons, the clearings between bathed in light from the cooking fires, scatterings of tents pitched for those who could find no room beneath a wagon's canvas. His departure from the Order's camp had been little more than a brisk farewell to a thoroughly impressed Simon and a deeply frowning Eric, the former promising him he would hand over the letter he had composed to Elquist come the morning. Brianna had taken a moment to make her own goodbyes to the squires who had become her friends over the last month, and they had left before the sun had fully set, riding until well after the moonrise before they had stopped at a small inn on the outskirts of Tumbeth village. The morning had found them risen early and on the road once more, his confidence growing with every mile. This was the right decision and, whatever happened between him and the Order afterwards, at least he knew he had been acting for the best as he saw it, a day riding south finally bringing them to the caravan and their goal. They stopped twice, friendly merchants confirming their course through the camp until, on the far side of the encampment, he heard them, Jahara's stern tones ringing clear from behind the wagon before him.
How much wild garlic did you use in the stew, Imoen? It is all I can taste now. Just the amount you told me, and then half again for luck. You weren't complaining when you ate it. Winthrop used to say I'd be a good cook. Your enthusiasm for food is certainly matched by few.
A look from Brianna, and Inomen drew a breath to at last stepped forward into that familiar circle of tents.
At least we won't have to worry about any vampires too, Inomen.
Imoen gasped, all faces suddenly turned to him, their surprise frozen there, golden masks in the firelight. Inomen swallowed. It was the first time he had seen everyone at such a loss, even the unruffled Jahara looking rather taken aback as she rose to greet him, the camp about her still seated and staring up at their pair, Fritha nowhere to be seen.
Inomen, and Brianna, as well, this is a surprise. Has there been some trouble with the Order? No, my lady, we. What are you all gawping at?
Cut in a voice behind and Inomen turned, Fritha's reaction the worst so far as she gave a start and the bottle she was holding slipped from her hand, the drow next to her darting forward to neatly catch it.
Inomen. Fritha,
he answered, just as surprised to find her there as she was, dressed in the slip she slept in and that blue-black scarf, the painted outlines of clouds and constellations swirled upon her shoulders, her tiered jade earrings lending an air of disparate elegance to the ensemble. And the girl could plainly tell, too, an uneasy smile quirking her mouth.
Oh, awkward, quick, Imoen, say something funny. Right, a man walks into a brothel. No.
Cut in Jahara, but the ensuing ripple of laughter was enough to diffuse whatever air of tension had been over them, Fritha receiving the bottle back from Solafane with a smile as she inadvertently echoed the druid.
So, you are both here, is there some trouble with the order?
Anoman drew a measured breath.
No, but in the course of our short journey I came to realize that, though my commander may not agree, this trouble with the ballspawn will affect more than just the people of Tethur, it could even change the heavens themselves, and I believe my place is here.
He glanced back to see if the woman beside him had anything to add, Brianna raising a critical eyebrow, though she said nothing. A silence that would have likely been echoed about the camp had not Minsk raised his voice.
Ah, you two are returned to our company and our cause, a great day when warriors such as good Anoman and Brianna feel the call of battle and heed it.
His enthusiasm seemed to stir the others.
Yeah, the more the merrier,
chirruped Imoen. Frithha nodded, the smile by no means reflected in her eyes.
Yes, quite, as Imoen says, misery loves company, I mean the more the merrier. There should be room for you to pitch your tents over there, speak to Hamble about any needs you have for your horses, his is the green-covered wagon just there.
Anoman nodded once, turning at her gesture to head towards the moss-hued canvas he could just see between the jumble of wagons, her low groan as he just stepped from the edge of their camp unmistakable, and Anoman glanced back to see her. Frithha's forehead dropped to his shoulder as Solafane whispered at her ear. Frithha shifted listlessly, the man next to her moving to accommodate. Even in her slip, the air was too close to bear any contact, she and Solafane sitting side by side upon her robe, an inch between them, the other seated and reclined similarly before their tents. Anoman and Brianna had returned not long afterwards. The pair offered the leftovers too, eating it with some bread from their own rations, a silence descending over the small camp as twilight drew in, all wilting in the sultry, cloying heat, while above them the heavy grey clouds rolled on, departing with their promised rain. Jahara thought it very odd, she had not felt the wind change. Frithha let her gaze linger on the pair opposite, and took a large, gloomy gulp of the heavy, dark wine, Anoman oblivious as he shared a quiet word with the woman at his side. They looked handsome together, tall and statuesque, the firelight smoothing out the slight untidiness to their clothes and hair that those many days on the road had left with them. Frithha watched them, him tanned and dark, his broad shoulders flexing as he leaned forward to serve her some more wine, the woman's smile softening her rather severe features, that heavy braid of hair over one shoulder and shining chestnut in the fire's glow. He had been her silver lining in this, her one happy success. Yes, the others had joined her for the bloodiest war Tethur had likely seen since their revolution, but at least Anoman was back north, living the life he had endured a decade of sacrifice and doubts to earn. But, no, now he was there, and Elquist probably hadn't even waited for the ink to dry before sending word of this desertion back to Prelate Wes Allen, and Frithha had the most awful feeling it was all her fault. She never should have embraced him as they'd left, told him she wished him the best. It had been too sentimental, too poignant, such emotion sure to stir in him the desire for some noble sacrifice. These knightly sorts were always ones for a lost cause. Ferdinand's words drifted back to her, unbidden and quite unwelcome. Perhaps he had not had a choice, perhaps none of them did, following in her wake like thralls to her power, ready to throw themselves before her, all dying for their chosen one.
Gods,
sighed Imoen loudly, a tang of garlic lingering in the air,
the sun set an hour ago, when will this heat die?
Frithha finally stirred enough to pull herself from that stupor, knocking back the last of her wine with a nonchalant flick of her wrist.
I'm going to the river.
Solafane nodded, making to rise as well, Anoman watching their pair with a frown that eased somewhat as the drow offered.
I will walk with you and find a place to make my prayers. A swim,
said Imoen, eagerly finding her feet and grabbing her bag.
Oh, count me in.
Their three turned, barely a step from the camp when.
I would come, too, if I may.
All eyes seemed to dart from her to Brianna. Frithha forced a smile.
As you will.
The water was icy. Fritha was slowly working up to full submergence, and was now in up to her thighs. The hem of her slip held out the way until she had braved enough of the water to bother removing it, trousers, scarf and earrings safe on the bank. Imoen had taken the opposite approach, throwing off her clothes with a wild abandon and dropping from the bank into the deep pool of the bend with a breathless shriek. Brianna stood on the shallower side in camisole and shorts of bleached cotton, water rushing about her knees as she tried to wash her hair, the tresses so greasy the soap refused to lather.
"Ah, that's better,"
sighed Imoen, the girl waiting from the rushing water, her teeth beginning to rattle as she hurried wrapped a towel about her.
"I'm almost cold now."
"Here," said Fritha, reaching back to her bag and tossing the still struggling woman opposite one of the fine soaps she had brought from Sultanaseller.
"You may find that works better."
Brianna smiled, seemingly surprised.
"Ah, my thanks, we arrived at the inn too late yesterday for me to attempt this then." "So, Brianna," came Imoen from the bank, the girl all wrapped up and head on one side as she tried to knock the water from her ears. "A no-man decided to change his mind and help us fight this five, and you came all this way with him. Aren't you worried about being kicked out the order?"
The woman shrugged, or did her best attempt at it, her hands still working on her halo of suds.
"I am not yet a member, and if they refuse me entrance for doing what I believe is right, then perhaps it is better it remains that way." "Oh, is that why you followed him down here?"
said Imoen innocently. Fritha sent her a frown, but Brianna seemed unfazed.
"In truth, it was I who told him to come." "You mean he didn't want to?"
Brianna smiled, eyes flicking to Fritha.
"Oh no, he wished to very much, but men such as a no-man find it difficult to do the things want." "How lucky that he has you then,"
continued Imoen sweetly. It was time to put an end to this.
"A no-man is very fortunate,"
said Fritha, at last hauling off her slip and throwing it to land on her bag.
"Not all his friends would have done as much."
Imoen's attention was instantly diverted, her gasp of delight audible over the chattering water.
"Fritha, you're back. Who did that for you?" "Cellophane, does it look nice?"
Fritha asked, trying to peer in vain over one shoulder.
"I haven't been able to see it yet." "It looks brilliant. Do you think he'd do one for me if I asked him?"
Fritha shrugged, lowering herself into the water.
"Probably. What will you ask him for?" What about me, looking all-powerful, surrounded by the remains of my fallen?" "What? You in a load of sweet wrappers?"
Brianna snorted, the woman choking on the soap she had inhaled, and Fritha could not help a smile as the two women either side of her laughed.
"Ah, you three are back,"
announced Jahara, a no-man glancing up to see the women returned, all damp-haired, and half-clothed, and he tried to look anywhere but at them as the druid continued.
"Good, we were about to bed down for the night." "Bed, bed, bed,"
sang Imoen, skipping over to where the drow was lounging with a book.
"But before that, Cellophane and I have something very important to discuss." "We do,"
the man confirmed, Imoen throwing herself down at his side, the camp about them slowly stirring to life as Minsk moved to douse the fire, Jahara packing up their leftover rations, Valigar seemingly distracted from removing his boots by Imoen's laughter, and in this activity a no-man found himself at her side.
"Ah, Fritha."
She glanced up from where she had been brushing down the robe that had once served as her seat.
"Fritha, could I speak to you before we retire?"
Her smile was at odds with her deep sigh, the girl throwing the robe about her shoulders to gesture back to the woods she had just left.
"In private, I suppose? Come on, then."
And he followed her through the trees, the chatter of the river just on the edge of his hearing as she brought them to a halt in a small grove, the girl throwing herself down onto the grass and waiting for him to do the same.
So, you're here, then? Yes. Fritha, though I believe my decision to return was the right one, I am sorry if you find my presence here difficult.
But the girl just shook her head, smiling tiredly.
It's all right, and your sword is always welcome. Brianna told us it was she who convinced you to return. She seems very nice. She is. And she looks to have your well-being well in heart,
Fritha added mildly, the measured look she sent him anything but. Anoman felt the blush rise with his discomfort.
Well, she, too, believes that our place is here, battling this evil. Yes.
It was time to change the subject, Anoman letting a finger hover over the scattering of henna stars that speckled her collarbone.
This is very pretty, Imoen's handiwork. No, Solophane's. He has quite the eye for pattern, apparently. It covers my whole back and shoulders, so I won't get to see it properly until I get to a mirror.
The words stuck in his throat.
So much of you were naked for it. Well, a significant proportion of me could have fallen under that description, yes. What does it matter? Everyone is under their clothes.
A silence between them, Anoman trying to find a voice for his reluctant question.
Fritha, are you and he friends?
She supplied promptly, most certainly. She heaved a sigh.
Anoman, why are you here? I left you all set and happy to return to Athkatla. You left me,
he corrected,
having just asked Sir Elquist to allow me to join with you. When he refused to heed my request, I was lost enough in myself to carry on that path, until Brianna shared her wisdom and recalled to me the reason for my return. Which is? Because I believe the five need to be stopped before they bring this land to the ruin we saw in Saradush. So it's not because of me then?
She pressed.
Honestly, Anoman, you must tell me the truth.
Anoman swallowed and gave her the answer she was so clearly desperate to hear.
Fritha, I followed my heart down here, just as I followed it from Athkatla, filled with a desire to see justice done and righteousness prevail.
The girl gazed at him a long while before nodding once, laughing weakly to herself.
I must sound so conceited. Good then.
She continued, clapping him soundly on the arm.
I am glad you are back, Anoman. The group does not feel the same with you absent.
Anoman smiled, foolish as it was and based on a lie. He was merely glad she was happy to see him.
I am pleased, then. And there is one last thing I would speak to you of, Fritha, the sleeping arrangements.
Fritha frowned.
Well, you brought a tent with you, did you not? If you don't have one, I can ask. No, I brought a tent, but it is to sleep to and, well, if you are still sharing with Solophane, and I am now here with Brianna.
Fritha heard his intimation, the frown deepening.
No, Anoman, I won't share with Brianna, I barely know the woman. She's your friend, you share with her. But Fritha. But what?
She interrupted sharply.
If it were Simon or Eric there would be no complaint, but just because she is a woman, you cannot lie innocuously next to her? Why? Question, Anoman, question the values you have learnt by rote.
He asked her to reconsider all the way back to their camp, but he knew well Fritha's obstinacy and she would not be moved, the girl bidding him good night and instantly disappearing into her own tent to leave him dithering outside his in the empty camp, before he dropped to his knees to call quietly,
Ah, my lady. You can enter, Anoman, I am quite decent.
Anoman pushed aside the flap to find her laid in the half-light beyond, just a shadowy outline under the blankets. Anoman quickly kicked off his boots and moved inside to kneel next to her.
"How is Fritha?" "Driving me to distraction, as usual,"
he muttered, hauling off his tunic and just resisting throwing it to the end of the tent. He could hear Brianna's smile.
"I like her. She is not as I would have imagined, but I can see why you favor her, though I notice,"
the woman continued, a slight disapproval creeping in,
"that the main reason for your return here was not mentioned among the ones you expressed to the camp."
Anoman could feel the heat rising in his face.
"Well, I was hardly going to say anything before the others, my lady." "You told Fritha, then, of your feelings once you alone had her ear?"
the woman pressed. The faceless nature of the question made the lie no easier.
"It was spoken of."
Anoman sighed, all his focus on folding the dark blue shirt as he continued,
"I am sorry about this. I asked Fritha if she would share with you, but she refused to see any unease to the arrangements. But we can get a tent for you on the morrow end." "Anoman, it is fine,"
the woman cut in calmly,
"and Fritha is correct, you would have none of these reservations were I a man. But you are not."
Brianna chuckled.
"I am a warrior before I am woman, Anoman, it is my choice and long has it been so."
There was not much he could say to that, Anoman finally settling down next her, the dark silence allowing the question he had been mulling on since they had left the order 2 nights before to surface.
"Brianna, why did you wish to come with me?" "Because I believe things are happening here, Anoman, great things, and I believe I am fated to be a part of them." "You are so sure? You seemed set upon joining the order even a few days ago, you came to Tether to prove yourself to them." "Yes,"
she answered slowly,
"I did say that, but in truth, what others see as humility, I know as fear. Anoman, I deferred my judgment, because I felt I would fail it. All the order know of me was in that letter from Sir Morgd, a noble man who was willing to view my actions rather than what lingered in my heart. I have a temper, Anoman. It has been so ever since my parents were taken. The sisters at the temple taught me to channel it into righteousness, but the anger lingers still. In battle it is a constant struggle not to lose myself to it, and I knew that were I to be judged, the order would see it and find me unworthy." "There is nothing wrong with having a temper,"
Anoman reminded, hearing her voice echo the words behind his eyes,
"as long as it is controlled. The order would have seen this. I know, for I am the same." "Yes, I confess I had heard this about you, though I could scarce believe it, you always seemed so mild. But if you have tempered your rage, then I must learn to do the same, and perhaps we can still stand in the order together one day. Good night, Anoman."
A rustle of blankets as she turned over, Anoman remaining on his back to stare up at the dark canvas, and it was a long while later before he joined her in sleep. End of chapter.